I turned 21 years old in the LA County Jail. I wasn't out but a hot second. I've been in jail all my life. Now, I'm not a Sunday school teacher.
Hello. This glamorous young actress, Sharon Tate.
Well, hello there.
And 4 other people at this Hollywood hideaway.
Some place where there are famous rich people whose murders not only will get a lot of attention, but might actually bring some kind of sick satisfaction to Charlie Manson.
People inside, if you lie, you get punched. And when I got out, all your children would come to me because they never had anybody tell them the truth.
Murder. Last night, a middle-aged couple was stabbed to death in a case that has striking similarities to the mass murder Saturday of actress Sharon Tate and 4 friends.
And I shouted across the newsroom, "It's happened again."
Squeaky, they were all in the first group.
Charlie is originally charged in Death Valley again with car theft. It's only after Susan Atkins, one of Charlie's followers who was involved in the various murders, is transferred back to LA, that she tries to impress some fellow inmates that things start to get put together.
It's like all the king's horses and all the king's men tried to solve this crime. But Susan Atkins had a secret that she had to share.
She started saying about how stupid the police were and how they really were on the wrong track on a lot of crimes. And I do recall saying to her, "Well, what are you talking about?" And her answer to me was, "Well, you know those murders of Benedict Canyon?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said to me, "Well, you know who did it, don't you?" And I said, "No." And she says, "You're looking at her."
Folger started to get herself undone, and she took off.
Abigail Folger, Wojciech Frykowski make a break for it out in the lawn.
I left and followed her. I ran after her with an upraised knife, and we went out through a back door, and I ran her down, and I began to stab her.
In July and August of 1969, the Manson family had committed 9 murders at 4 different locations. In 1971, Manson was convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder for the deaths of 7 people, including actress Sharon Tate.
They have 7 people who are dead, and they have no solid suspects.
How do you feel, Miss Brennan? In these colorful dresses. Sometimes they'd be singing. The contrast between the savagery of the crime and the kind of carefree nature, it was deeply unsettling.
Conspiracy in the deaths a year and a half ago of Sharon Tate, the actress, and 4 other persons at her home, and the killing of 2 other persons 2 nights later.
They are ultimately convicted of all of the murder charges and are sentenced to death.
And told her she was going to do it. She talked to the media about killing Sharon Tate.
I felt nothing. I felt absolutely nothing for her.
In 1971, her punishment later reduced to life in prison with possibility of parole when capital punishment was outlawed in the state.
She has no true remorse, but is focused on being a model prisoner so she can gain her freedom.
Despite the fact that she fatally stabbed Rosemary LaBianca 16 times, Rich Pfeiffer, Van Houten's attorney, says she's earned her freedom.
Sadly, something Leslie never had to consider when she was trying to show remorse so that she could get parole is that the bodies of her victims, Rosemary LaBianca and her husband, were discovered by her 16-year-old son, Frank. He had been staying with friends and opted to stay 1 day longer. Otherwise, a 16-year-old boy would have been another victim to Leslie and her cult friends. Murderers never consider the effect their act is going to have on the victim survivors. They ruin more lives than just the one they took. Survivors are often haunted by the images of death. They have nightmares, and they may feel that they should have been able to protect the victim. They often feel powerless over their surroundings and they can become preoccupied with their own safety and distrustful of strangers. But perhaps the biggest emotion that they have to deal with is guilt. And young Frank, at the age of 16, had to live with the guilt that he should have been there with his parents. And he was the only one who survived.
I knew that there would be killing.
Charles Manson told Lino and Rosemary LaBianca not to worry, that it was just a robbery and he wasn't going to hurt them. He wasn't going to hurt them.
And the sounds of Mr. LaBianca dying came into the bedroom. When Mrs. LaBianca heard her husband being killed by Tex, she started calling out to him and yelling for him.
And Tex came in and killed her.
And then Tex turned me around and handed me the knife, and he said, do something. Because Manson had told him to make sure that all of us got our hands dirty. And I stabbed Mrs. LaBianca in the lower back about 16 times.
During the trial, there was a lot of antics from the Manson family and from the 3 Manson girls. Even though they were incarcerated at the time, I'm guessing that at that time, and being in California, which was very liberal, they had more freedom than they would today, or they would in another state. Charles carved an X in his forehead, and somehow the 3 girls found out, and they also carved X's in their foreheads. Charles shaved his head, and so did the 3 girls. The 3 girls were always laughing and joking. The Manson family that weren't incarcerated also shaved their heads and were sitting outside the courtroom on the sidewalks every single day of the trial. I don't see any of this as signs of remorse. How these people ended up getting parole after being convicted and supposedly having the death penalty, that should have meant life in prison without the chance of parole. But we got to remember, it was a different time, and it is California. On July 11th, 2023, Leslie Van Houten walked out of a California prison. That was despite the fact that she was found guilty of murder and sentenced to the death penalty. During her career as a model prisoner, she was allowed to earn several college degrees, publish articles, publish books, and do paid-for interviews. Despite laws that are supposed to be in place that you cannot profit off a crime, Leslie's net worth is around $15 million. Make that make sense. Her main line of defense has always been that she was a mere child when she joined the Manson cult family. In fact, she was 19 years old. I don't consider that a child. She was, for all legal purposes, an adult. Her second line of defense was that she was under the influence of drugs. Drugs that she took willingly. I'm very grateful that all young people who take drugs don't go out and murder people. I don't find any of these things as an acceptable defense to her admittingly stabbing this woman in her home over 15 times. I don't find it a defense for her to be set free. She should have spent the rest of her life in prison, and she should not be allowed to accumulate any money. That should go to Crime Stoppers, to police, to detectives, or to the prison system for having to house these animals for so long. We should pray every day for the survivors of these victims, because the LaBiancas have grandchildren. Sadly, Rosemarie's son passed away in 2019, and he didn't have any children, but her daughter has children. I'm not going to say I hope you enjoyed this video, because there wasn't much enjoyable about it, but I hope it brought some awareness. Awareness to the fact that we need to hold the prison systems and the courts accountable, that we believe that when someone is sentenced, that's going to be upheld, especially when these people all admitted and even bragged about these crimes. It's not like we have to wonder whether they were innocent or not. They were guilty. They were proud of the fact that they were guilty for quite some time. I hope that you'll watch me again, and I hope that you leave comments. Even if you disagree with anything that I say in my videos, I still enjoy reading your comments. This isn't that type of channel where we're going to be the morality police and say, you have to think a certain way. I want to hear everyone's opinions on these cases. Thank you very much for joining in. Please hit the like